Hello and welcome to my presentation about selection as a control structure. This is intended for VCE students, for students in 1 and 2 computing and 3 and 4 software development. As our learning intentions, students can explain the main ways that selection works. Selection is one of those things that the deeper you dig, the more you find. So this is not an exhaustive explanation, this is just the basics. So, selection works like this. You've got the main path, which we can see over to the left there, and that is your sequence. So that's one step will go after another on that path, and you're kind of always moving forward. If a particular test is passed, so if that test resolves to the Boolean of true, then you will go off the if path. Now that path itself can have paths off it, but basically at this point here, you have a test that resolves to either true or false. Sometimes you can test and say, is something not true? So if answer does not equal Kevin, then you go off on the path. So that's still resolving to true because the question is asking, is this in itself not true? So you can have the truth of a negative. It's easier. It sounds complicated, but it isn't. Selection is also known as branching. It's also known as conditionals. Some people just say if-then, an if statement, and a switch case is a kind of a type of selection, but it holds together slightly differently, and apparently it's what all the cool kids use. So we'll be talking about that too. So at the heart of it, we have if 1 equals 1. Now, in most languages, when we're testing if something's true, we're using the double equal sign. 1 equals means we're stating that it's true. If we've got two of them, we're asking if it's true. So that's the test there. Does 1 equal 1? Then we print, obviously, and we end if. So the bit that is the selection, or the if, is the print, obviously. That won't always happen. That will only happen if 1 equals 1, which 1 always equals 1. We're looking at pseudocode, by the way, there. Let's have a look at it in Python. Python is a white space language, and in some ways it's an outlier from the other languages that we use. So name equals forward, well, that's part of the sequence, and then we're going to ask the question, if name equals forward, print hello comma name. So it'll say hello forward. So if name were to equal something other than forward, it would ask that question, but it wouldn't print hello because that question, does name equal forward, would resolve to false, and so it wouldn't do the optional bit. So this is the simplicity of it. Let's have a look at it in JavaScript, which is just up the top here. Now the question in JavaScript is contained in round brackets, and the then is expressed in braces. So if that thing in the brackets resolves to be true, then we do this, and it's implied that if it resolves to false, then we don't do it. Down here in PHP, you'll see our variables are denoted with a $sign. So if, and again, it's in brackets, they're not optional, it has to be in brackets, and A equals B, then it would echo A and B are the same number, and in this particular case it actually wouldn't do that because they're not the same number. So that's just your basic if-then statement. Your next step up is your if-then-else. So you could go back to your if-then and say if A doesn't equal B and set a condition for that. So you could have two tests. Does it equal, then does it not equal? But it's a bit neater to have this else. So if A is greater than B, we do this, and then else, we do that. So if the test resolves to true, we do this. If the test resolves to false, then we do this. This is Python that we're looking at here. And you'll notice that if and else are on the same indent, and that these things are on the first indent, which means that's their boss up there, the person who's on a lesser indent than them. Down here in JavaScript, we have a very similar structure, except we don't have these colons, which are effectively saying then. We have our braces there and there, and they don't actually have to be lined up. JavaScript is not a white space language. It's written with these indents for readability, but it actually has no impact on how the code runs. So this is very easy. You go this way for that if it's true, you go that way if it's false. Okay. So what we can now do is have a three-way intersection. We can ask our first question. If name equals Fred, print hello Fred. So that traffic goes off there. Now there's a second question. Now, if you go off on that first road, you don't even ask the second question. Once you've passed a test, you go off down that road. So all the Freds go down there. Next, if it's Josie, well, they go down that, and that's it. This is just two tests. And if you don't pass either of those tests, you do nothing. What is that? Oh yeah, that's Java. That's pseudocode. All right. This is what it looks like in Python. You have your first test there, and you have elif there. You'll notice that there's no else statement here. We've just got the first path and we've got the second path, but we've got nothing if you don't pass either of those tests. And that's perfectly fine if that's what we want. And then we have it in PHP, and it's basically the same. Did we look at JavaScript? Oh no, we looked at Python. Yeah, so there's our first test. We ask our first test, and then we actually bolt on an else if test. There's the condition of it, and there's what will happen. So you've got two paths, but you've also got nothing. Nothing is an option here. In this one, you've got the catch-all of else. So we're asking the first question, if A is greater than B, great. If that's not true, if that's still resolving to false, we ask the second question. If that resolves to false as well, then the else picks up everything else. So this particular statement, everything gets channeled onto another road. You can't stay on the main path, or this branches out. So one rule, second rule, everybody else. Now, switch case is apparently what the cool kids use. Switch case is very much like a series of elifs or else if statements. So in this particular case, where in JavaScript we're creating a switch and we're throwing in a variable. Let's say it's value 1. If it's value 1, it says case value 1. So that's checking this variable that's been passed in. And if it matches, so if it is, that's like an else if, we do this and then we break. We do this and then we break. And then we have the default action, which is like an else statement. I confess that I don't use them very much. They exist in JavaScript, they exist in PHP. They don't natively exist in Python, but there is some kind of workaround for it. It's on the wiki. Where are we here? So, switch case. Let's just have a quick look at what it says. So there's this thing called match case, which is actually very similar, if truth be told. So even though it's not called switch case, it's very similar. Okay, let's test what we know. In Python, the else logic is written as else if, whereas in PHP it is written as elif. Well, that's actually false. In PHP, I think it's written as else if, and I think there's a space in it. Yeah. Oh, there you go. PHP supports both. In JavaScript, the condition for an if statement must be enclosed within parentheses, but in Python, parentheses are optional. Yeah, that's true. Next up, all three languages use the colon character to signify the end of the line of the if condition and the start of the code block. Well, no, that's not true. Only Python does that, and PHP and JavaScript use braces. There we go. Curly braces. It's fine to call them just braces. In all three languages, a selection statement can only exist only in if block without requiring an else or if block. Hang on, I don't even understand that question. A selection statement exists only an if block without... so can you have just an if without an else or an else? Yeah, of course you can. So there you go. There is more to know. You can have multiple tests, and you can have like if name equals Mark or John, if name equals or includes the letter A and includes the letter J. So you can have or and not and you can actually build up all your conditions, and there are other various complexities along the way, but this is a pretty good start off for your understanding.